We'll do all of our various motions, and we'll go from that point forward. At the bottom of page 12, we will also then entertain unfunded potential additions to our budget, which would include potentially the library. It could be their Heritage Society presented last night. It could be transit. It could be any number of things that are unfunded and wouldn't affect the operating budget. So we'll go through the initial stage of page 12, then look at doing additions at that point. Okay. Having said that, I think at this point, I'd like to turn over the meeting to Mr. Dowler, Mr. DeBlanco, to introduce the proposed budget. Mr. DeBlanco, I believe you're up. You have the microphones on, sir.
Thank you. Good evening to the mayor and council. I'll ask the clerk to put item 3.3 up on the screen. Thank you. So I'm Curtis DeBlanco. I'm the Director of Finance for the city. I'm just going to go through a quick review of the slides that were presented on November 14th as a refresher for both council and the public. We'll go to the next slide now. So the proposed budget includes 4 separate budgets, really. The municipal operating, utility operating, municipal capital, and utility capital. Municipal operating budget funds tax supported services for the city. Utility operating budget funds the utility supported services of the city, water, wastewater, curbside collection, and stormwater drainage. Municipal capital and utility capital for this year have been separated in the document, which is a change from prior years. This is intentional. It just emphasizes that utility rates must be set at an appropriate level to support the renewal and the replacement of crucial utility infrastructure. Next slide. Thank you. Perfect. Just a quick review on the table on the screen, which is also page 12 of the budget document. The positive and negative numbers on the table are put so in a manner that's in relation to the tax levy. A positive number on the screen contributes towards a tax increase, whereas a negative number, for example, increased revenue contributes to a reduction of the required tax increase. The cost to maintain existing services for 2024 contributes 7% towards the tax increase. Next. So after that 7% for maintenance of services, the full annualization of the Service Experience Office, this was approved as part of the city's 23 budget, is included in this 24 budget. So the additional $204,000 reflects the full cost of operating the program over the course of 12 months. Next. It's expected that an increase to the city's RCMP contract represents 2.6% of the proposed increase. This is based on forecasts provided directly from the RCMP via their multi-year financial plan. And last, it's expected that an increase of 3.9% to the city's assessment base will result in an additional $1 million of additional growth revenue for the city. That brings us to that number on the bottom of the screen, which is a 6.49% proposed tax increase. So as we can see on the screen, over the past few years, the city has approved below inflationary tax increases. One impact to this is deferring the ability to respond effectively to pressures arising from the growth of the city. Compounded with rising inflation, the overall tax increase that was proposed reflects the need to catch up on the city's physical growth. So quick caveat on the slide on the screen before is that we received the final numbers from the Water and Wastewater Commissions since initially proposed. So there are some slight adjustments to that utility numbers, which I'll go through in a second here. But on the tax side, this would result in a $197 annual increase to the average residential ratepayers tax bill. On non-residential properties, this is approximately $62 per 100K of assessment. Like I mentioned, the slide hasn't been updated, but I'll bring council's attention to replacement page 13. Like I said, since the presentation, administration has received final rates from the Wastewater and Water Commission. Compared to the rates originally used to calculate the city's variable rates for each of these, wastewater has increased their rate and the Water Commission has approved a rate that's below what the city had forecasted. Next slide. There's a minor impact from these things on the utility budget at the ratepayer level. This is a 50 cents a month impact. It just shifts the amounts between water and wastewater. On the tables on the replacement pages 47 and 48, as well as the user fee table on 127 have been updated to reflect this. But sorry, one slide back. Mentions on the screen that as proposed, it was 10.8 on utility rates. Now, just with those minor changes, it's 11. Thank you. So the next thing, which is capital budget, the city funds its renewal and replacement programs through its capital reserves, which are contributed from both municipal operating and utility operating budget. The proposed budgets include the renewal and replacement of 4.9 million in existing municipal and utility infrastructure, including the projects on the screen. And then the next part is growth. The city responds to needs in the community by funding growth-related projects. We have growth funding sources for these, including capital grants, offsite levies, and debt. Once again, there's a highlight of a few of the growth projects that are funded within this proposed budget. So a question and answer process over the last 2 weeks has been put into place to help answer questions council may have on the proposed budget. These question and answers are included in the agenda package this evening as item 4.1. At this time, I'll turn the floor back over to council for any clarifying questions on the presentation or on administration's responses to the questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blanco. Appreciate that. I think what we're going to do now is any questions from council on Curtis's presentation from the slides. If there are none, we will hold our responses down to item 4.1. We'll begin with item 3.2, which is information report on council identified capital project for Mr. Lewicki. So are there any questions for Curtis's presentation? If not, we will be going down to the questions section under 4.1 on the agenda. Seeing none, Mr. Lewicki, are you prepared to proceed forward at 3.2? Wait, something? Yeah, I got 4.1 here, yeah. Or, sorry, Madam Clerk. Go ahead, Madam Clerk. I got 4.1 on my agenda for council responses. Sorry, did I miss something there?
I think there's just a little bit of confusion because Mr. DeBlanco spoke to both the introduction to the budget and the responses. So administration would be happy to take questions on either the budget in general or any of the responses included in the response document at this time.
Okay.
I don't think we can expect Mr. Lewicki to answer all of those questions, but he'll certainly do his best.
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, once you take
I
a
would
break,
enjoy watching him try.
that's okay. Well, that's what I kind of thought. Then I jumped down the bin and saw 4.1 responsible questions. So thank you, Mr. Lewicki. I appreciate that. So we're going to change gears here slightly. I apologize, council. I read something differently there. My mistake. So at this point, I'll open up to council questions that you received answers for. If you require any clarification on the questions you answered, or just have any questions about it, now's the time to ask any clarification from the response we got from administration. So Councilman Newkirk, Stephen, you have the floor.
Yeah, Mayor, I kind of organized myself so that I'm gonna ask along the way. I don't know how others have done it, but
Okay.
I do have some questions on the questions and I thought I'd just insert them as we move along. So that's how I was gonna do it, but that's
Okay,
fine.
we can do that. That's fine for your seat. That's fine. Anybody else have some question want to maybe get clarified at this point in the meeting? And if there's not, we will then proceed to 3.2. Mr. Lewicki will join us back at the front in a moment if there are no further clarifying questions from members of council on the answers we received. Councilor Telebus, Nathan. Oh, Madam Clerk, you wish to make a comment before we go to Nathan?
Sure. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify that items 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5 are all supporting documentation for the introduction of the budget.
Okay.
So we've completed item 3, introduction of the budget. We've looked at the responses to the council questions. So we have 15 minutes before the library presentation. I see that Laura is with us. Did you want to go next and we could we could escalate things and then we could move to the municipal operating budget as council had requested when we adopted the agenda.
Okay, before they start, Nathan, do you have a question on the clarification, like on one of the questions?
More so just confirming that agreement.
Yeah, down the road is fine. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for clarifying. Thank you, Nathan. Ladies, would you please join us at the table? Please state your name for the record. Welcome back to council. Been an entire year since we've seen both of you together. It's gone by very quickly, and I appreciate your being here. And when you're ready, please begin your presentation. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Aruna Brennan. I'm the board chair for the City of Beaumont Library Board.
And I'm Laura Winton, the director for the City of Beaumont Library Board.
So hello, Mayor Daniluk and council, and thank you for the opportunity to present the library's 2024 budget request. The Beaumont Library's aspiration is to be a place for everyone to gather, explore, learn, and express themselves. We accomplish that vision by connecting people to ideas, experiences, and to one another using our programming, collections, space, technology, and of course, staff. Before we dive into the 2024 budget request, we want to give some context and rationale for our request. So I'm going to pass it over to Laura to talk about our programs and services and how they've changed and evolved.
Thanks so much, Aruna. So 2023 has been a really interesting year at the library. It was our first year without any pandemic restrictions or service limits, and it really did feel like we were settling back into normal. We at the library spent those pandemic years getting really clear on our goals and priorities and thinking hard about the way we run our operations. And one of the themes that emerged was that we were always trying to work harder and do more and more and more. And sometimes we didn't stop to think about how we could be more efficient with our resources. So moving into 2023, we knew we wanted to focus on quality and efficiency. So we asked ourselves, how can we offer the very best services in a strategic, coordinated way that is evidence-based and uses our resources to the maximum benefit? Programming was one of the places we knew we needed to think and move differently in. Pre-pandemic, the focus was always on adding more and more programs, but we weren't increasing staffing, so it wasn't sustainable. And in some cases, it was a little bit inefficient. So in 2023, while we did increase program numbers and participation from 2022, we didn't aim to get back to our 2019 pre-pandemic numbers because we knew we were just offering too many programs with low average participation rates. Instead, we were strategic about when and what programs to offer by carefully examining the needs of our community, identifying gaps in service and overlaps in service, and thinking carefully about program timing. Ultimately, we saw a 20% increase in average attendance per program from 2022 and a 5% increase in average attendance per program from 2019, so that pre-pandemic number. Our collections have been a major budget focus for the past 2 years. Our collection is made up of the material on our shelves that we lend free of charge to the community. The past 2 years, we've been working to ensure those materials are relevant, high quality, up to date, and most importantly, represent the diversity of our community and support Beaumontonians in our work towards truth and reconciliation. 2023 was the second year in a 3-year project to increase our collection size by 50%, bringing us closer to Government of Alberta best practices for collection size. So in 2023, we increased our collection size by 12% from 25,000 items to 27,808. We are on track to hit our 30,000 item target by year-end 2024 if we receive our requested funding. This will leave us 16,000 items below the Government of Alberta standard, but we're not able to fit more than those 30,000 items on our current shelving. So we feel pretty good about that. We also saw increases in borrowing. We project we will have lent 174,226 items by the end of the year. That's a 10% increase from 2022 and a 6% increase from pre-pandemic borrowing. So space, the library offers access to free, safe, welcoming space. And libraries are one of the only places people can come and just be without needing to spend any money. We know from our own community engagement and from engagement the city has done that spaces to hang out are really at a premium in Beaumont. And we're one of the few public spaces that meet that need. We continue to see growth in the use of the library space despite our challenges with size and noise control. Visits were up 17% from 2022, exceeding pre-pandemic visits. And where we saw an even larger increase was in the customer service interactions that our staff are conducting, and that includes technology help, readers advisory, and reference services. So based on our sample weeks, we're estimating that we'll have answered 37,725 patron questions by the end of 2023. And that's a 22% increase from last year, and it also exceeds that pre-pandemic demand for staff help. So the last bit of usage information I want to highlight is our household membership rate for Beaumont. There are 3,390 households in Beaumont with an active library membership, and that's 46% of households in our community. It's also a 33% increase in household memberships from last year. So we're very proud of this number. It's the best indicator of community engagement with the library. And we're just so proud to be able to say that nearly half of the houses in Beaumont are using our services.
So the library has had a busy year, and we're planning for an even busier year in 2024 with new services, more materials on our shelves, and an improved space to meet community needs. The library board, focused in the fall of 2023, preparing our 2024 operating budget. That includes a new video game collection, an increase in overall collection size to meet growing demand, plans for student page positions, and a new organizational structure to increase outreach and partnerships. So before we dive into our 2024 priorities, we wanted to be accountable to our 2023 commitments and look back on what we've accomplished. We're proud to report that with the support of Council, we've met all of our operating budget priorities for 2023. We introduced digital literacy and STEAM programming for our school-aged children, and I'm excited to report these are our best attended programs with 20 or more children in each session on average. Demand was so high that we're increasing the frequency of these sessions to twice weekly in 2024. So we're very proud to be meeting this community need. As mentioned, we also increased our collection size by 12%, slightly exceeding our goals. And we completed an HR and governance review that has led to a policy review project to ensure that we're equipped to meet the needs of our growing community. We're so grateful for the support that Council offered us last year and proud of how far we've stretched every dollar. Our 2024 budget was developed with 4 priorities in mind, each drawn from our strategic plan and designed to support Council's aspirations for Beaumont. The first 2 priorities require increased staffing dollars. We want to increase our community outreach and partnerships in the community. We know times are tough for a lot of families, and it's not just finances, but time that's a scarce resource. We want to meet people literally where they're at, bringing library programs and services to them. We will leverage partnerships and make sure that the library is integrated with other community services so that we're not duplicating resources or asking community members to attend more than one thing when we could be combining offerings. This work requires strategic oversight and the development of operational frameworks for partnerships. To achieve this goal, we have replaced the manager-level position with a deputy director position who has the training and qualifications to successfully develop in this new area. Our second priority is to add student page positions. As we circulate more and more material, the amount of basic collection tasks like shelving increases, and our staff are struggling to keep up. Meanwhile, we know that there aren't enough quality employment opportunities for Beaumont's youth. Our front desk staff regularly receive resumes from high school students and queries from parents regarding employment opportunities for their kids. Hiring student pages will meet an operational staffing need while offering rewarding employment opportunities to 3 high school students here in Beaumont. Third, we want to complete our 3-year collection expansion project by increasing the collection size by another 10% and bringing it up to our 30,000 item target. This still leaves us again below the Government of Alberta best practice standards by about 35%, but it is what we can fit on our current shelving. We know the work that we've done to improve and expand our collection is paying off. Our circulation numbers are up, and our patron comments are full of feedback about how nice it is to find the material that they're looking for on our shelves rather than having to wait for it to be brought in from other libraries. And finally, we want to introduce a video game collection. Video games are a standard collection item in public libraries. A strong body of literature documents that gaming increases literacy, problem solving, critical thinking, and fine motor skills. Currently, our patrons have to join a long wait list to borrow video games through the interlibrary loans from other libraries. Our patrons have borrowed over 500 video games to date, and video game borrowing is increasing year over year. One of the most asked questions at our front desk is, where are the video games? We know that video games are high interest collections across different age groups, but they see particularly heavy use and interest from youth. There is a significant need in Beaumont for activities and outlets for youth, and the library has struggled to engage this population. We have plans to use this new video game collection in new youth programming, and we're also excited to explore partnership opportunities with the Chantal Berube Youth Center using these new resources. We know youth are playing video games in our community, sometimes in isolation or in online communities, so the programming we can offer at the library with this collection could really offer youth in-person community-based social connections through their gaming interest. So our 2024 operating budget was developed with these 4 priorities in mind. Our total budget for 2024 is projected at $1,365,000. Let me just say this again. $1,365,900, which is an increase of $94.2 thousand from our 2023 budget. So this translates to a funding request to the city of $1,210,700, which is an 8.5% or $94.5 thousand increase over our 2023 funding. We worked hard to find efficiencies in our staffing to reduce the impact of these new positions in the deputy director restructuring. We also closely examined our operating costs and eliminated spending where we could. We're confident that this budget will allow us to meet community needs and achieve our priorities. So before we move on to our capital carry forward request, a quick slide showing the per capita cost of library services over the past 10 years compared to the per capita cost if funding had matched inflation. When we're talking about the per capita cost, we're looking at how much the library is costing the city per community member. The blue line shows the actual per capita funding for the library services based on the grant we received from the city. And the green line shows what library funding per capita would have been if it had risen to meet inflation. So the library's per capita funding fell during the pandemic. This year's increase will bring us slightly over matching inflation in order to add the video game collection.
So in addition to our operating budget request, the library is also requesting that city carry forward the unspent $210,000 in 2023 capital funding that was allocated to the community gathering spaces project to the 2024 capital budget. Some of our councillors will remember this project from last year when you graciously agreed to fund it. I'll do a quick recap for new council members and then explain the need for the carry forward request. So last year, City Council approved $210,000 in capital funding for the library's community gathering space project. The primary objective of the project was to meet community needs for functional, comfortable spaces to gather by addressing issues with the current library space. We love solving multiple problems with a single solution, so we're going to use innovative curved shelving to divide the space and create nooks and crannies that will allow more gathering spaces. And by using shelving to do that, we'll meet our secondary objective of expanding our collection. Finally, we'll ensure our new gathering and workspaces are functional using noise mitigation solutions like baffles and sound clouds to create loud and quiet zones. So just a reminder of why this project is important. Libraries are vital community gathering spaces, especially in winter cities. We offer free, safe, accessible space, and our other services, books, magazines, toys, technology, study space, seating, are all designed to invite people to hang out in our space. To fulfill our promise as a community hub, we need a physical space that supports gathering, where people feel a sense of invitation and comfort and want to stick around. As council is aware, we have significant space issues at the library. We're less than half the size we should be to serve our current population. But it's not just that we don't have enough space. We know both as experts in library space planning and from feedback from our community that our facility presents some real challenges for people looking for a space to hang out. We regularly hear from patrons that the library is too noisy, that people feel exposed in the large open space, that they worry their children are making too much noise, and that studiers have trouble concentrating because of all of the background sound. As a result, we see a pattern of community abuse where most patrons don't linger in our space. Patrons tend to come to find a book, pick up a hold, attend a program, complete their online forms, whatever they're doing, and then leave when they're finished. And we don't like that pattern. We want patrons to come into the space to complete a task and then stick around because it's such a lovely space to be. We want people to think of the library when they're setting up a group meeting, planning coffee with friends, or deciding where to hang out with their kids. So we know we have issues. We have a vision. You're supposed to first, I'm having an issue with my slideshow. Don't worry about it. There was a picture of the current library, and if you saw that, you would see that we have a central space in the library that houses display shelving and some study tables, but the current shelving is old and starting to break down. The space is very open, and it just doesn't feel like a space for hanging out or browsing. So we want to replace that shelving with what you see on the screen here, much more functional curved shelving that creates an inviting bookstore feel and draws patrons into the space, inviting them to explore. So what you see here is an early render of what the space would look like from the same perspective of the previous photo. Don't worry, you guys know the library. You know what it looks like now. That's what it'll look like when we're done. It's much better, trust me. That's just a little look at the layout for the planned space. So again, adding that curved shelving in a large new gathering space. So just to quickly review the costing, the library has committed our full capital reserve of $144,000 to this project in order to fund the operating impacts of the additional collections we'll need to purchase. City Council committed $210,000 in capital funds in 2023, and we're currently waiting to hear about our application for an additional $109,000 from the Government of Alberta's Community Facility Enhancement Program Grant Fund. So why the delay? You'll recall that Council delayed 2023 operating budget deliberations, and because of that delay and some complications with the way the library structured our initial request, we didn't have a full funding commitment from the city of that $210,000 until May of 2023. And that delayed our application for the Community Facility Enhancement Program Grant Fund. And as a result, we won't know if we're successful in our efforts to get that grant until March of 2024. So the board decided that rather than complete the project with a reduced scope with the available funding, it made more sense to delay the project until March 2024 in the hopes that we are successful in that grant application and we can proceed with the full scope. So we are requesting that Council agree to carry forward the committed $210,000 from the 2023 capital budget to the 2024 capital budget.
So on behalf of the library board and staff, I want to thank Council for the opportunity to present the library's work and share our 2024 operating and capital budget requests. As always, we are so grateful for the support Council and City Administration provides, and we are excited to continue to offer Beaumont opportunities to explore, discover, and connect in 2024. Laura and I are eager to answer any questions that you might have.
And we promise to get an updated picture.
That's actually pretty funny. Ms. Brandon, Ms. Whitson, thank you for your presentation. Much appreciated. At this point, open up members of council questions they may have on the presentation from our library. Councilor Cook, Kat, you have the floor first.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have a lot of questions. I just want to say thank you so much. You guys always do a really great job there, and it's really great to see so much participation at the library, and I think it speaks volumes to all the hard work that you guys all do there. Knowing that 46% of households hold memberships really demonstrates the importance of the library and the services you offer. I think when we talk about community building, a library is definitely central to that. So it's definitely important. And I like the idea of thinking outside the box a little bit and adding those high school student staff positions if you're able to, because I think that is certainly something that we're lacking in our communities. So I appreciate you guys putting that forward, and thank you so much for all the hard work that you do.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wishing to make a comment or a question? Oh, Councillor Barnard, Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't let you come and not say hi and thank you for all that you are doing, as Councillor McCook has said. I'm sure you're aware that the package before us has this as unfunded. I know that's not going to be a surprise to you. You would know that. I want to give you the opportunity to tell us what would be the impact of it not being funded from your perspective. And the other thing I wanted to say at this point is that, and I don't know if our new members have been caught up yet on the fact that the library can ask for funding. They can spend it as they wish. Council doesn't direct where you spend that money. You're very kind to tell us where you plan to spend it, but if you decide to choose something different, that's under the Act, you're allowed to do that. So while you come to us like a department, you're really not a department. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to what happens if. And feel free to say, no, we don't want to tell you that, but I'd like to know.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Barnhart. If the request isn't funded, I would need to bring a proposal back to the board. So it's not for me to say they would need to approve this, but what I would likely recommend to them would be that we pull the money from our collections budget and from our programming budget. Those are really two of the only places where we can get it. So we'd be looking at likely a decrease in collection size in 2024.
Just one question. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions, members of council? At this point, seeing none. Ladies, again, thank you for coming in. I had the privilege of serving on the library board as a member of council for the last 10 months, and I found it to be a very rewarding experience. I understand the passion of the library board and the passion of the employees who work there. I will say, your administration of the library, you guys can stretch a dollar like nobody's business. And I do appreciate that. And it really is. And the library is a very important part of our community. I have every confidence we'll be discussing the library as part of, once we go through operating budget, then go into the unfunded requests. And yours is unfunded at the present time. I'm sure we'll be discussing it at some time then at the end of our operating budget. And hopefully we'll see how that goes for you. Okay. But again, thank you for coming to the presentation. It's always very informative and we appreciate your time. Thank you this evening.
Thanks so much.
Right. Next on our agenda, I believe, Madam Clerk, we're now going into the operating budget. Is that correct?
Council would be willing to make a motion to receive the presentation for information.
I can make that motion, sure. I move that the November 29, 2023 report on the Beaumont Municipal Library be received for information. Council discussion on the motion? Seeing none, council, I'll ask you to vote on the motion on the screen before you. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I now believe we are now going into the operating budget. So I'll ask Mr. DeBlanco to present to us the operating budget, and we will begin then going down, as I mentioned before, page 12, and we'll start working our way down through the operating budget. Mr. DeBlanco. There you go.
Thank you. The bulk of presentation for the operating budget was included in the initial presentation, but outside of page 12, which we went over before, I can speak really briefly over municipal operating budget, which is, you can see it in two layouts on page 16 and page 17. What it is a municipal tax increase of 6.49 included in the municipal taxes budget is that $1 million for assessment growth, which increases the municipal tax funding by $2.6 million. We see individual transactions for sales and user charges, franchise fees, small increase, some ups and downs on different revenues. Overall, it's very much a maintenance budget based on what we see on page 12, with the full funding for the service experience office, the full 12 months there, as well as the impact from other entities, which would be the RCMP staffing contract. So outside of that, would conclude my presentation on the operating budget.
And Mr. Blanco, appreciate that. Okay, any questions for Council, Mr. Blanco, on his brief presentation? I'm assuming not. Okay, we'll get into our operating budget now. As I mentioned, we will start on page 12. At the top, there are two categories. There's maintaining services. There's the top section and called increase, decrease in revenues. And the second section, increase, decrease in expenses. So I'd like to have council go through the top section of page 12, maintaining services. There are protected services, economic development, planning development, recreation, community and social development, and other items. So at this point, I'm open up to questions from council to administration on these categories. We will take, as I mentioned, the consensus approach. So if a councillor wishes to question one of the line items there, make any changes to it, we will discuss those changes and take a consensus approach and see how it may affect if council is looking to adopt the idea. Mr. Blanco will keep a running total of any changes as we go through the top section. So any questions on how we'll proceed? We're comfortable with that? Okay, with that, I'll open up the floor. Any members of council willing, or it's not willing, having concerns or questions or any idea of changes on the top section, protected services, down to other items? There is, as Mr. Blanco mentioned, $154,000 to the good. We actually reduces taxes. For anybody listening at home, on this page, a negative number is actually reduces taxes, a positive number increases taxes. It's kind of the reverse when you think about it, but in accounting makes perfectly good sense in the accounting world. So a negative number is good, a positive number is, well, I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's less than good. So with that, I'll open up any concerns or questions on the top section of page 12. Going once. Then nothing on the top section. We'll move into the next section, which will be the increase, decrease in expenses, starting at pay and benefits, aquatics, utilities, lease space, department adjustments, and department efficiency. So I'm assuming, council, that the top section from protective services down to other items is not being debated or discussed at this point. Thank you very much. Just make sure we're clear. Anybody listening at home who's following along on the overheads on live YouTube, that's how we're proceeding. So I'll now go into the next section. As I mentioned, increase, decrease in expenses from pay and benefits down to department efficiencies. Questions, concerns, thoughts? Councilman Newkirk, Stephen, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In this section here, I'd like to put forward a motion and be able to speak to that. Thank you.
A motion, we're doing more consensus.
Yeah, how about I put forward an idea and then speak to that idea and we'll see where it goes from there.
Okay.
I can read the idea out yeah, let me do that. Let me read out the idea here. And then I have a whole bunch to say about the idea, and then I'll be very interested in council's thoughts on the idea.
Okay, please proceed, Steve, when you're ready.
Okay. The idea is that the proposed 2024 municipal operating budget be amended by removing the funding for the cost of living adjustment in the amount of $332,600 and the merit and benefit funds in the amount of $449,000. That's the idea. So now, if I could speak to that.
Please speak to the idea. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And please bear with me. I have a fair amount to say here on this. So
take your time, Steve. We're in no rush. Make sure you convey your idea to your satisfaction.
You bet. And I'll be reading a lot from here. I've prepared a fair bit of notes on this. So the most common feedback I received on this budget is concern with, thereabout a 4% tax increase being triggered by the how it was presented as the the COLA merit benefits and mid-year staff adjustments. So the context of these numbers, the way they were presented in one lump sum at $1,079,000, the concept of those numbers I think never got there and was immediately lost. The narrative on that number was lost because it was presented as a big lump sum. Had a big shiny bow on it, and it invited all kinds of criticism, and that is the number one thing that I heard as I asked around and talked to people. Now, what I will say is not near as many people as I thought reached out to talk about this budget to me. I'll be interested to hear what other councillors experienced in that, which resulted in me reaching out to a lot of people at the BSRC around the community and, just friends in general to try and get feedback on things. The consistent piece was the narrative around that $1 million, pay increase. So what I will say is through the councillor questions, we learned that number was comprised of three pieces, and it was a 2% COLA, a merit and benefits, and then a mid-year staffing addition and adjustment. So there was actually three pieces that went into that number. So, we know that now and we present that tonight. And these numbers and the budget numbers in general aren't as simple as they may seem at all. It may seem that you can simply do something, and you can, but there are cascading effects that happen and are associated with a whole bunch of those different changes. Not only this subject, you're going to hear that throughout the discussion. There's give and take, and there's if then that. There's a lot of if thens that happen during budget. So could there have been more context in the presentation of the numbers? Yeah. Does it change the complexity of putting it all together? No. Even tonight I learned that in the merit and benefits section of the breakdown, there are actually hard costs built in there for the actual cost of the benefits increasing. once again, not a simple thing to just carve out and change, because, it's all lumped together for a presentation. Could we have presented it by department? Sure. Could we have presented it in 3 sections? Sure. Could we added 25 more lines to the summary on the front to break it down? Sure. It doesn't change the amount that's there. So I think in all of our jobs that we hope for our own COLA and merit increases, I'm sure our city staff, like you at home, for this, for your same roles, you're hoping and expecting the same. The reality is that, those are in fact coming far less often, and some people have wages that are in fact going backwards. But, my point in saying that is that the folks who are saying, go take away the pay increases, turn that off, don't give a pay increase because I didn't get one, are probably still hoping for COLA and merit-based pay increase in their own jobs too. So that's not lost on me. And, I share that because I think that's an important piece to reflect upon. It's also it's also not lost on me that it might not be fair for the staff at the city to be penalized for working at the second fastest growing community in Alberta. Our municipal cost of growth and our growth pressures are a lot, and this budget is going to show us that. Now, I can anticipate that councillors are going to say or ask, do you believe that staff deserve COLA and merit in their jobs? What I say is I believe that staff need to be compensated fairly and appropriately. And that means that city staff and managers who have the job descriptions, understand individual employee performance, and evaluate it through the performance management system, they make the calls. Council's job is to approve a budget to do that. And that's the topic at hand here. So I also expect to hear, if this is approved, it'll drive away staff from Beaumont, and we will have a hard time with people wanting to work in Beaumont. That's true, and I agree. And it's fair to ask, does council, through the will of residents who have strong feelings on this, want to create a situation where employee attraction and retention is at risk? That's the question that we ask ourselves here. Do you actually believe in this motion? And if you don't, why do it? There was a strong ask in the community for council to have this conversation, so I'm bringing it forward. It's an awkward one. It's unpopular, but I wanted to bring that conversation because it was the most asked for conversation that I had. A little bit of data. Basically, in the last 7 years, 4 of those years since 2017 contained no COLA. So in 2017, there's a 0. In 18, there's a 1.5. In 19, there's a 2. 2020, there's a 0. 2021, there's a 0. 2022, there's a 0. 2023, there's a 3. And in this budget, there's a 2% proposed. So I'm not sharing these numbers to presuppose my opinion or position or to change the mind of any one of our residents on the issue. I'm sharing them because those are the facts on COLA. I also know that COLA has not been awarded to many of the residents working in Beaumont probably at their jobs in the last few years either. I get it. So for me, a couple of concluding bullet points here. The goal here is either to get it to 0 or acknowledge that this isn't what council wants to direct administration to do. That's the question that I'm putting forward here. There are complexities and nuances with all of this, and the numbers are not as simple as they look. So that's my prepared remarks. I've put forward a motion that it sounds like I don't support, and that may be the case. But the conversation that is in front of us now and that is open, or sorry, I didn't put forward a motion. I put forward an idea that is up for discussion. What I'm asking for tonight is members of council to provide their thoughts on that idea and debate the idea. If you want to debate me, I'm here all night, but let's talk about the idea. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So before I go to members of council for questions to our discussion points on this topic, I will at some point ask Madam Clerk or CEO or Mr. DeBlanco for administration's perspective on the idea of having no COLA or merit increases and the effects it may have on staff from administration perspective, try and get both sides of the fence. I do appreciate, Steve, you try to present both sides of the motion at the same time, which I appreciate your effort doing that. So, Madam Clerk, do you wish to make a comment first before I go to a council, then I'll come back to administration?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a procedural comment.
Okay.
This really is a motion. It's been moved. Just we're going to get into a procedurally very awkward place. So let's deal with this as a motion as moved by Councillor Van Newkirk. Council is welcome to have further discussion on other items of the agenda, but once you put an idea or a motion out and you speak to it, it is a motion. So we'll need to dispense with this, however council sees fit, and I'll turn it over to whomever in administration wish to answer the mayor's questions.
Okay, so before I go any further, so Steve, it will be an actual motion then instead of simply a consensus discussion. Okay? You want to say one more thing before we go any further? Steve, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So let me just formally move that the proposed 2024 municipal operating budget be amended by removing funding for the cost of living adjustment in the amount of 332,600 and the merit and benefit funds in the amount of 499,000. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go to CEO Schwartz and then I'll go to my fellow councillor for their discussion, starting with Councilman Goff-Swain. So CEO Schwartz, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. There hasn't been a question asked of me, so at the risk of jumping into council's debate, I'm just going to stay silent at this point in time. And then if any questions come up, I'll answer them.
That's fine. So I think it's fair to give administration the opportunity to explain their viewpoint on how this may affect their recruiting purposes and so on. And you did mention that as part of your discussion, Steve, about potentially impacting on recruiting and so on. So that's good. I'll begin with Councilor Goff-Swain, followed by Councilor Penrod, followed by Councilor McCook. Sam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Van Newkirk, for bringing this forward. You're absolutely right. The community wants us to ask this question. So let's get into it. I will also say that I was anticipating this, so I have a few remarks and bear with me as I get into my passionate little plea here. I also agree with the narrative that Councillor Van Newkirk mentioned, that the lack of description in here on the increase in pay and benefits in the budget, and why and what that is for, is why the community is justifiably asking these questions. So I don't think we helped ourselves here, but let me get into my thoughts. So what the motion is proposing, and Steve mentioned it, is a fourth 0% increase for administration in 7 years. I'll get into why I disagree with the motion shortly, but let me just walk back a few years here, because the reality is that I believe anyway, we've done this to ourselves by putting forward several budgets that are under inflation. And I think the motion unfairly penalizes administration for our budgets. When I say our, I mean council. I recognize that not everyone here voted on all of those, but that's where we are. A lot of the conversation here, through campaigns, et cetera, is about being, those two words, fiscally responsible. And I say this every budget, and so I'll say it again because I think it's especially important this year. So my personal philosophy is that we should always be targeting our budget around inflation, and so that we can appropriately look over the term. Being fiscally responsible isn't about looking at 1 year and trying to get the lowest tax increase possible. It's about responsibly managing our budget over the next 10 to 20 years. So coming in at a 2%, 1%, or even 0% budget, these are well below inflation. Personally, I think are irresponsible. And ultimately, it just pushes the burden down to future councils to have to pay for the budgets of the past. And I, to a point, this is kind of a part of why we're here, right? So let's get into the specifics of the motion, though. So COLA, personally, I don't think COLA should ever be debatable. I understand merit, and we'll get into that, but what is COLA? Effectively, it's trying to adjust wages to match where the cost of living is. So if you're earning $50,000 a year and your groceries are $300 a week, in 1 year, and the next year you still earn $50,000 a year and your groceries are $400, you're actually paying that person less, right? So COLA, I don't think we need to be getting into that specifically. Merit, I do agree. We need to talk about that. And so thank you for bringing that forward. I think we all agree that admin has moved mountains with a very little staff compared that they have for what we've asked them for. We keep throwing motions at them. We've got a very aggressive strategic plan. and the results speak for themselves. Everyone here received that municipal indicator report from the province. While it was very, very tough to manage and read through, but what it shows is that we are at Beaumont are understaffed per capita in Alberta, and salaries, wages, and benefits are also below average. Admin's wages, we've heard, are below our regional competitors here. So, Councillor Van Newkirk, you said we should pay people, you support paying people fairly. Well, the data shows that we're paying them under average across the board. I get why the public wants to scrutinize this part of the budget. I agree, and we do this every year. We look at staff wages, and the reality is that we've been beyond prudent with this over the last 7 years. Admin themselves has brought forward 0% recommendation increases, particularly during COVID. Council has ground wages down over the years. And so we have been prudent with that. If we keep doing this, at some point, we're just going to be going backwards. Council likes to talk a lot about making data-driven decisions. And, well, the data's in front of us, and it shows that we're under the average here. The team that we have in front of us, they want to build something great here in Beaumont, and we need to attract and retain people to deliver on this aggressive strategic plan that we have asked of them. The motion comes under, as I mentioned, that the motion really comes under the guise of being fiscally responsible. But I can assure you it's a lot more expensive if we lose staff and have to hire new staff and to train them. And I can also assure you that we're not going to attract the talent that we want to deliver on our strategic plan to fill those positions if Beaumont is known as a municipality that consistently gives their staff no increase. We've all heard over the last little while the fantastic comments about the amazing work Beaumont is doing. This has come from government ministers like Nathan Glubish, who talked about during the 10 gig announcement, said how, just how much Beaumont is absolutely crushing it. The Premier mentioned during, in the conversations during the Innovation Park, how much we're punching above our weight. And even our colleagues at all the municipal conferences that we go to, they constantly wonder how we're doing all the fantastic stuff we're doing. And while council may look to take credit for that, we can have a small part to plan that, but the reality is it's admin who's delivering the results on the plan. To Councillor Van Newkirk's point, I recognize this is a tough year for everyone. Everyone within Beaumont and also around the region. Every municipality is feeling the pinch. Most are above 6% tax increases. Inflation has got everyone here. But for me, given the low to zero increases admin has had over the last 7 years, I believe this modest increase is prudent. Personally, I'm looking to build a fantastic community here in Beaumont. We've got a great strategic plan, and we need talent who want to work here to deliver the results that we all expect. So I'll be voting against this motion. I appreciate bringing it forward. I know that there are a lot of people who are wondering everyone's position on this. So I wanted to state mine clearly and look forward to hearing everyone else's. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate the comments. Councillor Penrod, followed by Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Barnhart, Councillor Telebus, and then I'll bring up the back end of the conversation. Councillor Penrod, Phil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments will be relatively brief, but I just want to start by reiterating some of the appreciation that you've just heard for the work that you're doing in this room. Every time I have the opportunity to meet with someone that works for the city in whatever role, I come away impressed by not just the quality of the work that's happening, but the passion and the enthusiasm that's behind the quality of that work. And I think that's where the quality is coming from. We've got something special happening in here. At the same time, though, I do want to say to my colleague, Councillor Van Newkirk, you have a gift for stirring up difficult conversations and taking the risk to stick your neck out. And I appreciate that too. This budget is full of difficult decisions. When I added up my Christmas list of what I'd like to see, it would come in around a 13 or a 14% increase. I'm not sure I would be able to return to my house. I'm not sure my wife would let me in the house if that's what I brought forward. So for me, it comes down to a bit of a horse trading effort. and there's competing values here. So I'd like to recognize and retain and continue to be able to attract amazing talent. I also know the folks that are currently working for us need help. And so part of my Christmas list is wanting to actually create new FTEs and new opportunities to bring more people on deck to do the heavy lifting. But I can't do that and give everybody the raises that are proposed. So I come to this debate with an open mind. I don't know that I have the answer. So I would be leaning at present towards more amending the motion than voting against it outright. But I'm not just sure what amendment I would propose at yet. So maybe it's best if I stop speaking at this point.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor McCook, followed by Councillor Barnhart. Kat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Monkhoff-Swain covered off a lot of points that I feel as well. I agree that the narrative was kind of lost in the big lump sum, and so then it's hard to go back and explain it all. I think, you know, with being the fastest growing community, at what point do we continue to ask people to do more with less? I think eventually you kind of hit a wall. As we see it now, we have quite a few master plans and strategies in place that may not get as much attention and focus because we don't have the resources. And I think if we put this out there, there's a strong possibility that we could lose people. And if we do, what does it look like trying to get those qualified people back, or people of similar caliber here? We all know the cost of employee turnover, time lost, all that starts to add up quite significantly and quite quickly. I think it's also important to really connect this to quality of service. We have good quality of services here, and our administration is always looking to improve our services. And I think, you know, having fair wages impacts the quality of services we're able to provide. For me, it's also a little bit of a demonstration of values. I think being an ethical and responsible employer, it's prioritizing fair wages. And Councillor Monkhoff-Swain spoke to the data that says we are below average. And I believe we should be leaders in ensuring that our people are taken care of. And part of that is taking care of mentally, and part of that is also ensuring that they're compensated fairly. I also think that when people are compensated fairly and know that they're valued, and know that the people governing the city value them, they're motivated to do a really great job. And I think that really shines through. And some of our projects that have come forward and are working on, as Councillor Monkhoff-Swain also said, we kind of move mountains to make some of these things happen. And that doesn't happen if you don't have people who are dedicated to the community and to seeing the community thrive. I think if we govern by saying this year's difficult, this year's difficult, this year's difficult, and we talk about fiscal responsibility, I think we'll just never move the needle, and we'll continue to encounter difficult year after difficult year, as we have seen. And I certainly understand the difficulty that people in our community are facing as well, and that is certainly taken into account. But I think with our salaries and wages below average, at some point that impacts our service delivery. We have educated, experienced, and passionate people here. And I just wonder how many times we can ask them to freeze their wages and to not think that that's going to impact service delivery at some point. So I won't be supporting this motion. I do agree that, you know, potentially through the merit and benefit, you know, I could have some additional questions around that. But I think at the very least, cost of living is, it's fair. It's fair. And I think to Councillor Van Newkirk's point, everybody's hoping for a cost of living adjustment because it is very difficult out there. So why do we want to be one of the ones that says people don't get that? So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Councillor Barner, followed by Councillor Telebus, followed by me. Kathy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I didn't expect this conversation to happen tonight, so taken a bit off guard, so speaking off the top. But I feel passionate about this whole topic. I appreciate it being brought forward because it does need to be something we all agree on. I actually was pleasantly surprised to see it was only at 2%. I thought 3% at least, because inflation, last time I looked, seemed higher than 2%, given going to the grocery store and paying all the other bills, it's really high. But I do recognize that residents are also saying, well, why do we have to pay the increase? It's not the same, even though people put it in that same category. All the points I'm pretty sure that have been made already, I agree with Councillor Penrod, Councillor McCook, and Councillor Munkoff-Swain. I don't want to repeat them all, but I do want to say that I agree we should attract the brightest and the best, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. And I don't want them to leave, and I think they may. One of the questions I'd like to ask the CAO, if you're ready, is to explain what is in the numbers that Councillor Van Nieuwkerk brought forward there, and you know, I see where he gets them from. The 449 merit and benefit. Are some of those benefit cost things we don't have any control over?
CEO Schwartz.
Yes, absolutely. Our extended health has been risen. Has gone up 17%, and dental has gone up 18%. That's the employer's portion. We had a similar increase in that last year as well. So yeah, that's built in there.
And the other question for you, Mr. Schwartz, is what is the do you know what's happening in the region around Edmonton? Not so much Edmonton, but in our sister and brother cities around the donut. What's happening?
Yeah, we all stay pretty close. There's none of my colleagues that I'm aware of are presenting or have approved a 0% increase. I know of several that have gone to 2, 2.3, 2.7.
But no one's done 0.
Nobody has done 0
at this point. Edmonton, I just want to make sure. What is Edmonton?
We don't compare ourselves with Edmonton because we just can't.
But I'm just curious. People will know. Is it three or are they at 0?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't
I
even
honestly
know?
didn't. No, because I didn't. We can't compare with them, so I didn't speak to.
No,
Andre.
but people that go there, work there, hear that, read it in the paper. I just was
Well,
wondering.
and we lose people to Edmonton if that's what they want to do, is just be in it for the money. We're building an organization that's more than just the money, for sure.
And I'll just finish off, Mayor. Thank you very much, CAO, by saying that, yeah, this is something I would not support. I think we have a very ambitious agenda. I'd rather see us look at reducing expenses and not doing as much so quickly, rather than lose the staff that we need to get us to that place. So if I had to choose between cutting, I have a long wish list as well, like Councillor Penrod. If I had to choose, I would rather not choose cutting in the staff salaries. I would cut some of our projects and wait a while to do those.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Councillor Telebus. Nathan, you have the floor.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. First off, I do want to thank everyone that's brought this forward. Obviously, initially, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk there. But I do want to thank all of the city employees. Obviously, we wouldn't have the success that we have as a community, as a city, without all of your efforts. So I do want to start off with saying that doesn't go unnoticed, at least from this group here. So we really appreciate it. One thing that I do want to mention, though, there is a lot of overused terms, you know, financial sustainability. Is it feasible? And we do have to look at some of this stuff. Going through the numbers, I know we've talked about it. 2022, we saw a COLA increase of 2%. 2023, 3%. And it's important that we factor that in. Prior to that, 2021, it was 0, and 2020 was 0. I never want to take, I know there was mention here of cutting salary. I think the term was just potentially used incorrectly. I do not support that. I wouldn't want to go backwards. I wouldn't want to see any family or any worker go backwards. But speaking with the broad community, a lot of individuals within the community haven't seen any raises, any increases, any COLA for that matter, for a long time. And much like Councillor Penrod here, I've had the opportunity to bang on a bunch of doors and speak with the general public. One of the things I also want to mention here is, and perhaps administration or Mr. DeBlanco could speak to this, but one of the comments that was made here, just got to run through it. It speaks to, so question 44, it says the city of Beaumont recently conducted a comprehensive compensation review for its workforce. The findings from this survey indicate that Beaumont offers a comparable compensation package to regional comparators. Overall, the philosophy is for the city to offer a competitive wage, roughly equivalent to the 60th percentile of regional comparators. This aligns with our commitment to ensuring that our workforce is appropriately remunerated. So I guess my question to administration is it fair to say that our group are fairly compensated with a competitive wage for the most part?
CEO Schwartz, would you wish to reply as best you can?
That's correct. Yes, we just did a comparison that is going to require 3 of our bands to be adjusted upwards slightly, so that will put us closer to our comparables. And we use similar cities to our size, like Camrose, Fort Saskatchewan, Chestermere, bad example. What's just on the west side of Calgary? Leduc is in there, St. Albert's not in there, Strathcona County's not in there, Sturgeon County's not in there because they pay in and around the 80th percentile. So we're going to move away from percentiles and call it a competitive, or sorry, a comparable wage package. And without bumping the 2%, we will fall behind. We are behind in 3 of the bands right now, and without a bump, and I looked at my notes, and the average in the region is 2.5%, Councillor Barnhart, then we will fall behind.
Okay, thank you for that answer. One other thing I just want to add here, actually 2 more things. Obviously I'm not in support of not providing financial incentive for someone who performs well. But given the time, given the stresses that the community has elected us to speak to, I would have to say that unfortunately for our city staff, this is something that I would support. As Mr. Schwartz had mentioned, we're building an organization that's not just about the money. We're building a culture, and I'd like to think that a lot of our individuals within this group are intrinsically motivated as opposed to extrinsically. If council, from what I'm perceiving here, is not in support of this motion, I'm just curious if we'd be willing to amend this motion to have a slight decrease, just for a little bit of cost savings, again, to help protect that tax levy of our average citizen here within the community.
If you're done, I'll have my comments. I'll go to Steve. It is his motion. He may decide to entertain amendments possibly. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
I will speak the motion as well too. I'll be very clear, as Councilor Marco Swain was earlier, and being very definitive. I do not support this motion for a couple of reasons. First of all, Steve, I do appreciate you bringing it forward. Difficult conversation. This is exactly why we're here, to have difficult conversations and tackle difficult topics and make difficult choices for the betterment of our community. So thank you for bringing it forward. I do try as mayor to be as open as possible and accessible to the residents for questions, comments, my coffee sessions, my town halls. I had 2 people from the community contacting me about the budget. Their concerns were not about payroll. Their concerns were about capital projects, other things. Having said that, in the past, we did do 2 zero budgets that I was part of. I never felt good about giving our employees 0 a couple of years ago, but I was very happy. Not one city employee lost her job at the direction of the council. Other municipalities did that. We didn't. We didn't reduce services either. So it was a bit of a trade-off there. And I think I'm proud of them not having employees lose their job. I'm not happy about giving them 0 increase. But that was part of the package a couple, 3 years ago. This year, the economy is different. Inflation is very, very high. People aren't losing their job left and right, but they are having an inflation squeeze on their bottom line. And I am not in favor of having no COLA for our employees. And I believe the merit increases are very, very important to our employee morale, well-being, retention costs. One council already mentioned retention costs are very high. So I am not in favor of this motion as presented. One last quick comment, if you don't mind, talk about people really getting budget feedback. Our budget is proposed at plus 6.49% proposed increase, correct? 2.6% is for the RCMP, which we have almost no control over the cost. So if you take that off the top, we're starting at 3.89 starting point, which includes what's presented here at $1 million for merit, COLA, and so on. So relatively speaking, we are starting, relatively speaking, below other municipalities. So having said that, I will not be supporting the motion as presented. With that, I'll turn it back to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. You may wish to speak your motion one more time before I call for the vote, or you may wish to amend it. Steve, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. One piece that I do want to talk on that I have a pretty strong opinion on is fiscal responsibility. That was put forward a few times tonight, and it's overused and misused and misunderstood all the time. I've often said that you can't profess to be fiscally responsible unless you understand the issue inside and out. So until you take the time on an issue to understand it inside and out, as in the repercussions of a decision one way or another, I don't think you can profess to be fiscally responsible on an issue. So, what I've seen council do already in this budget cycle is ask 292 questions and spend countless hours to understand the issues that are in front of us. So I think we're getting into that fiscally responsible category because we're taking the time to get through all of this. So just want to say that. And regarding any amendments, for myself, I'd prefer to stick to the motion that's in front of us. To the points I made earlier about the complications involved in getting to these numbers. How much is due to hard costs on what we hear, the dental and vision in the benefits, and start pulling these numbers out. What I'm talking about here and what's in front of us is the spirit of the COLA pay merit increases. That's what I put forward just for clarity, and my preference, Mayor, is for us to vote on the motion at hand. So those are my closing comments just on fiscal responsibility and not looking for any amendments. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to wrap it up. Councillor Penrod, you have one quick comment to make? Go ahead. Bill, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Mayor Daniel. I just wanted to raise a point of clarification if I could, if that would be in order. If this motion comes to a vote and is defeated, my concern is if we don't, and I appreciate as the mover of the motion, you're not wanting to get into amendments. If this is defeated though, do we lose the opportunity to propose any other kind of changes to this particular line item? That's just a question coming from my ignorance and inexperience.
Madam Clerk, my understanding would be that you could bring back a subsequent motion to it. Madam Clerk, could you clarify for procedure, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Penrod. So with the motion on the floor, if this motion is defeated, you couldn't present the same or substantially the same motion again. So you'd have to present some other cut. So my advice would be if a councillor wished to make an amendment, they would obtain the floor and make the amendment at this time. The amendment would be debated and voted upon. And then depending on whether that passed, it would be the motion either as amended or as it originally stands. So we can't keep re-debating the same line item, essentially, is what I'm trying to advise. I hope that clarifies.
Councillor Penrod, does that help you? Oh, sorry. Your mic's on, Phil.
Yeah, so I just again speak across the way to my colleague, if you'd entertain an amendment to the motion at all.
Councilman Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Again, not looking to entertain a friendly amendment. There is a process that the clerk described that we could go through should you wish to proceed in that way.
So your choice, Mr. Penrod, is to make a proposed amendment to this motion.
Sure.
Council will debate that amendment. We'll vote on it, and then we'll see how that goes. Councilor Telebus, your button's on now. Did you have a subsequent comment before I go back to Mr. Penrod?
I think it'll depend on what he mentions here.
Okay, I had a funny feeling that would be, so I'll go through Mr. Penrod first. Phil, do you wish to make an amendment to this motion?
Yes,
But you-
please.
Sorry, you want to move an amendment to this motion?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So we might have to help me with the language here a little bit. But that the proposed 2024 municipal operating budget be amended by removing funding. I think it'd be simplest if we just said removing funding in the amount of $255,000. So that would bring the overall amount to, help me with the math.
Councillor Penrod, are you suggesting a lump sum? So
Yeah,
the
what I would,
449 plus the 362 will be reduced to a total
Yeah.
different amount
The
as
spirit
opposed to
of-
one or the other? Okay, just so we're clear
Yeah.
what you're trying to accomplish.
yeah, so the
Okay.
spirit of what I'm trying to accomplish is a 1% reduction in what's proposed. So the amount of $1,072,900 brings with it a levy increase of 4.22%. What I'd like to do is bring that down to 3.22. And I would like to leave it with administration to take that lump sum of money and distribute it as they see fit, whether they want to adjust the COLA amount or meet their requirements for benefits and do merit how they see fit. So I'd like to
Madam
give
Clerk,
them
I'm
that
suggesting take a
flexibility.
5-minute recess to allow you, Mr. Penrod, to figure out the best way to word the amendment. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes when you have a chance to talk and work it out. You're good with that? Thank you, ma'am. 5-minute recess, everybody. Please take